So, I'm going to be making a Southwest pork and bean soup. Need about 2 pounds of dried beans soaked overnight. Anything that floats to the top, scoop them out. They're no good. You soak them overnight to get the nitrogen out and lots of other nasty stuff. That water is no longer clear. I've got some pork broth left over and some pork roast from a Louisiana style pork roast, full head of celery, 2 yellow peppers, 3 medium-sized carrots, 2.5 cooking onions, and an orangi. Yes, I do weird things to my food. Stock, you can use chicken stock if you're in a pinch. I saved some from, as I said, a Louisiana pork roast and froze it, and to keep for this wonderful soup. Okay, so now I've got my 2.5 onions, 2 peppers, 4 medium carrots cut. They're all in here. I've got about 4 tablespoons of salt. And I want to give everything a stir. I don't have heat on yet. What I want to do is I want this to sweat. You'll already notice there's a lot of moisture coming out. The salt, you let it sit for a few minutes. It's going to draw some of the moisture out. Start making the stock. Before you even turn this on, it helps bring out the flavor as well. And it cuts down on the color from the carrots reaching out, but with a soup like this, I kind of want the orange color coming out. Over here I've got my celery ends, the bottom and the tops, plus the heart. Make sure it's well washed. Carrot ends washed as well, onion ends, onion peels, and carrot peels. I'm going to boil these off. They're going to add to the stock that's going to go into the soup. A lot more vitamins, nice color, and just much nicer flavor to the soup overall as well. Okay, so these have been sweating for about 15 minutes now. You can see the juice coming out. Go to the bottom. You can actually see that fluid kind of down there. That's start of your stock. Look at all that. You put on medium heat. You take the spoon out. Stir it periodically. Do this for about 5 minutes. And then from here we're going to add in our stalks. Okay, so at this point it's really important to get the flavors in your stock. So I've got my vegetables going there, they're bubbling away. I've turned them down to medium. Don't want the water to reduce too quickly, I want time to extract all the goodness from the carrot ends and the celery ends. Get all the flavors out. In the main pot, I got 5 cups, or a liter, 6 cups, or 1.5 liters of pork stock. You can substitute this for a mix of chicken and beef stock, if you don't have pork stock. I, at that point, added 3 liters of water. I should mention this is about a 15-liter cooked sauce pot. There's 1 whole orange that you can see in there. If it's seedless, you can plop it in just like that. I washed it first. If it's not seedless, get some of the rind off, put that in, and then just squeeze and juice the orange. Use about half of the juice, depending on how orangey it is. Remember, it's easier to add stuff than it is to take it out. From there, I've got a teaspoon of thyme, level, and all of these following tablespoons are level as well. You don't want to heap them up. 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 4 tablespoons of medium paprika. If you have regular paprika, add in an extra tablespoon of chili powder to make up for the lack of heat. Medium paprika does have a bit of spice. I have 3 tablespoons of pepper. I have 2 tablespoons of turmeric. I have 1 teaspoon of sage, 1 tablespoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of basil, 2 fluid ounces of demerara sugar. Brown sugar is acceptable as well. This will give you a nice molasses flavor to add in to the base. There's 6 ounces of tomato paste, or 1 small can, and now we're just going to give it some time. I'm not ready to add the beans in yet. I'm going to give this a chance to develop. I've also got a little bit more pork to cook up and add into the existing pork I have left over. So I'm going to give this some time to just cook. Probably, yeah, maybe an hour on medium heat, just long enough to come to a light boil, and then keep it there. And then once that happens, I will start adding in the remainder of the pork and beans, and potentially this beautiful stalk right here. I'm going to give this a stir so all the flavors mix. And we are back. It's been about an hour. Half hour in, I turned this down. Well, I turned it down, but I moved it to the back burner, which is smaller, and I refilled it with water and filled it back up. So this has been boiling for an hour now. I'll probably go another hour with it, and I'm going to top it up with water about another hour, another half hour. So, meaning 30-minute mark, you add water, top it back up. Hour and a half mark, do the same thing again, and then you let it boil down to roughly this amount. Over here, so I added in about 2 ounces of lemon juice, 2 packets of chicken stock, which is roughly 2 tablespoons. I got this garbage because it was all that was available. I prefer normally different types, but is what it is. If you've got like the liquid stuff, you only need about a teaspoon. I don't mind the powdered because it does add a nice salt flavor, but personally I prefer homemade chicken stock. That's what I consider good, and anything that's not homemade is garbage. So I had my beans soaking overnight, so I drained them. I rinsed all the water out. It was kind of nasty color, filled it back up, gave them another rinse, and now I've just added them in. So I'm going to keep the heat on medium. I also have in 3 tablespoons of granulated garlic powder, and I will add in a bunch of fresh garlic later, but that will come. I'm going to leave this boiling. I have not added my pork in yet. The reason being, I add seasoning in different times with different ingredients to give you different depths of flavor. As Shrek said, he's like an onion, he has layers. My cooking is like an onion, it has layers. So each stage I'm going to add in certain seasonings, so that way the ingredients I add in at that time are going to have a slightly different accent to their flavor, which will harmonize in your mouth when you're enjoying it. So now that I've got this in, I'm going to bring it up to a light boil. It should take about 5-10 minutes. If not, won't take long. Once it's at a light boil, I turn it down to about 4. I leave it uncovered, periodically adding more water as required. And I'll give it another half hour to an hour at this point. Probably about 30 to 45 minutes. And at that point, I will start adding in my pork. Yes, so nummy. This will be a nice full pot of soup to share. I will say, when you're straining the beans, they get heavy. So I usually put them in a juice jug. The reason being, I can just put my hand over it, open my finger slightly, and easily pour it out. If you have a good sieve or a good colander, you can also just pour them directly into that too, and give them a quick rinse underwater. But make sure it's a good one, otherwise all your beans will go down the sink. Nobody likes it when beans go down the hole. So at this point I've diced probably about 3 pounds of pork roast. I'm going to add it into the soup. I turn the temperature down to about 3 at this point. It's been an hour. It just came to a boil. You don't want to keep it at a heavy boil. The beans will fall apart. Just going to add this in. Any fat pieces, if you cut your own meat and you butcher the chain, I usually roast those, put them in the freezer, keep the stock, and then I'll add them into stuff like this. So what I've done is, I'll show you in a second, I've added the chain into my stock now, just to kind of add that much more flavor to the soup. Little things add up. So over here I've got my recently refilled stock. I refilled it at the hour-and-a-half mark again. Added in the chain from the pork. So we'll give this another 45 minutes. Sometimes things take a little bit longer than you anticipate. I'll kind of smush the pork in so that flavor comes out. And then I'm going to add that in to here, which I've just added in about a tablespoon, just under, very level tablespoon of cumin. Cumin's a very strong spice, so add it in with the meat, because the meat is the most robust ingredient going in here. This way it doesn't control your soup, and your soup won't taste like cumin. Mostly, the meat will absorb most of that flavor. If you put the cumin in too early, it ends up coming out more so into the broth, and not so much into the meat, and it's harder to blend in. It will just overpower and take over your soup. From this point, it's just a couple more hours of simmering. The last half hour, I will add in some frozen corn and a buttload of fresh chopped garlic. Probably 8-9 cloves, or usually a whole head, depending how big it is. Garlic is good. And back for the last little bit, there's 7 cloves of garlic. Added in about 8 ounces of corn, 1 cup. You can do 16 ounces, you can do 4 ounces. It's really for sweetness and color. So I'm going to add in this stuff. Add in the garlic. Now that the garlic is in, the corn is in, I'm going to give it one more stir. I'm always delicate when I stir. Very careful as well. The reason I don't boil it is to not dissolve the beans. If you cook this too long, right now we're at about 5.5 hours in. I'll be shutting the heat off at this point. I'm just letting it coast because there's enough residual heat in there. The garlic and the corn will cook from that. But if you look at the beans, they've got a nice texture to them. Now if you boil this or you overcook it, which people tend to do with bean soups or pea soups, it looks like baby poop. It's just less appetizing. To me, it's, you dish this up in the bowl, it's not about the flavor, but I really like the beautiful color that you get on this soup too. So you get all the different colors coming out.